Hi, my name is Jennifer Howard. I'm the owner of Facets Relational Care, and today I'm going to be doing a video on the average levels of health for Enneagram Type 6. I recently, about 2 weeks ago, posted a video on what an Enneagram Type 6 looks like when they're really unhealthy, and today we're just going to follow along and do average levels of health. If I have enough time, I will add what it looks like to be a really healthy 6 in here as well. Or I could do that in its own separate video. For those of you that don't know, I mention it at the beginning of the videos in this series just because I like to give credit where credit is due. The theory about the different levels of health for each of the Enneagram numbers is not my own. It comes from two Enneagram experts named Don Rizzo and Russ Hudson. It's a fantastic theory. It's one of my favorites. It really adds just an extra juicy layer of goodness to an already fantastically in-depth tool. So it's a great thing to study if you haven't. I highly recommend it. I hope that the series that I'm doing at least provides you some type of look into the many different facets and the many different ways that someone of a particular Enneagram type could express themselves. Okay, so I'm doing anywhere from 1 to 3 videos for Enneagram Type 6 because also, if you don't know, I am a 6 on the Enneagram, specifically a 6 with a 7 wings. So this is a number that I know about in a very personal way. In the last video that I made, however embarrassing and awkward it was, I used a lot of my own personal examples from my own life simply because they're just great teaching moments, you know. You kind of get to hear it from the horse's mouth. I'll do the same thing today, talk about myself when I am in average levels of health, as I most usually am, because that's why they call them average levels of health, because on average, that's where we are, right? You know, the same is true for any Enneagram number. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up today. I start at the bottom at the worst level and work my way up. So we're going to start today on level 6, okay? So we're talking about what does it look like to be an Enneagram Type 6 and to be at a level 6 stage of health. So when you're a 6, if you're at a level 6 stage of health, this is the place where you're dealing a lot with your insecurities, and it's an insecurity of self. It's a feeling that you do not have any internal sense of direction, and this fear that you're not capable of getting what you need for yourself. You're not capable of saving yourself, maybe another way to put it. And if you're a 6, you kind of have a twofold problem here, because on the one hand, you don't trust you to be your own source, if you will. But at the same time, you don't really trust anyone else either. And so there's this constant, you know, I call it just this internal vacillating issue, I guess, where you're just, you know, maybe I should trust me, maybe I should trust them. I don't know who I can trust. Maybe I can't trust me, maybe I can't trust them. And just always this constant turmoil revolving around who is going to save you, what's going to be your source of life, your source of information, what thing can you rely on to be your guide, because you just don't know what you're doing in life, right? And I think that when you're a 6 and you're at a level 6 state of health, this internal struggle is becoming fairly predominant. This is the stage that you're going to be in right before you slip into the 3 worst levels of health for Type 6, which is level 7, 8, and 9. Again, if you want more information on that, I just did a video 2 weeks ago about that. This is the stage for Enneagram Type 6 where I would say that the whole fake it till you make it thing really starts to come into play. Like, that's basically your entire MO. If you're at a level 6 stage of health, it's fake it till you make it. Some examples of behaviors that you could see, depending on whether or not you like to operate out of a phobic stance or a counterphobic stance. By the way, most 6s will go back and forth between the two, myself included. You may have periods of time in your life as a 6 where you tend to take a more phobic stance, meaning a more compliant stance, or you may have other stages or periods of time in your life where you begin to take on a more counterphobic stance, which is to say a more rebellious stance. again, most sixes are going to go back and forth between the two, sometimes as much as, back and forth in the same day. I can have that happen to me a lot. When I was a child, when I was growing up, and actually probably up until I was maybe mid-20s, right around the time that I got married, I think I very heavily sat on the phobic side, very compliant, very quiet. I relied heavily on other people to, give me information, tell me what to do. I had to have other people confirm that all my decisions were okay, that sort of thing. And I've swung very heavily now to the opposite end of the spectrum here in my late 20s, getting ready to go into my early 30s. And I'm talking about being a person now that's much more on the rebellious end of the spectrum, not with the intent to rebel or to spite somebody, but just to, I found my own voice. I know what I want. I have kind of found this inner sense of assertiveness, and there's not this fear anymore of what will happen to me if I kind of stake my own claim. You know what I mean? I'm getting to trust my own inner guide, so to speak, versus what other people want to tell me I should or shouldn't be doing. I'm getting to the point where I just don't care anymore. So that's just an example. So if you're 6 and you're at a level 6 stage of health, and you tend to sway more towards phobic behavior, that's going to come out looking like passive aggression. And I would also say something that I've noticed to be really common, especially in myself when I'm being more phobic at this level of health, is sarcasm. It's like I've got my opinions of what I think about you and your stupid ideas or the situation or whatever it may be, but I am so incredibly fearful of you not agreeing with those or you not liking that I have those opinions. So I don't necessarily state them directly, but I kind of put these little sarcastic jabs in on the side. Very passive aggressive thing to do. If it's a 6 that is more counterphobic, as I can be sometimes as well, then they will become very bossy at this stage. This is the stage where, I don't know if you guys have ever seen, there was a 1980s sitcom. I think it ran into the 90s for a few years, maybe up to 1995 or something. It was called Roseanne. It had John Goodman, Roseanne Barr, Johnny Galecki. Isn't that how you say his last name? You know, the guy from Big Bang Theory. He plays Leonard. Anyways, he was in there too when he was a young kid. But anyways, the character from that show, Roseanne, played by Roseanne Barr, or whatever her name was at the time. She's been married like 8 times or something. Anyways, that character represents to me what that counterphobic 6 looks like when they're at a level 6 stage of health. And when I talk about being bossy, if you can watch even just a clip, that's what I'm talking about. Just it's this place where we're like, I'm just not going to take any bullshit. Again, it's the whole fake it till you make it mentality. It's puffing ourselves up to make ourselves look more confident and more in control than we believe we actually are. And we're hoping to God that you buy it. We don't buy it, but maybe if we do it long enough, even we'll buy it. We don't know, but we're just hoping to God that at least you buy it. You know what I mean? And it's a form of self-protection. You see what I mean? We're hoping that you will realize that you shouldn't be messing with us and that you'll just give us what we want. And yeah, we're kind of like the pufferfish of the Enneagram in that respect. Yeah, I just had that realization. Anyways, moving up to level 5. 6s at a level 5 stage of health. At this point, I don't know if we have consciously realized that we are internally battling that whole my agenda versus their agenda kind of a thing. Am I going to be my internal guide, or are they going to be an external guide for me? I don't think that we have fully become aware of the fact that we're having that struggle at this point when we're at a level 5 stage of health. But when you're 6 and you're at a level 5 stage of health, you are feeling stressed. You are starting to noticeably carry the weight that comes with being so compliant. When you deny yourself and deny what you want and what you think for long enough, you're going to become resentful of the people whose agendas you support. So if I deny what I want long enough in my marriage, for example, after a couple of months, couple of years, couple of weeks, the time length is different for each person. I'm going to start to become very, very resentful of my husband and the things that he wants and the things that he needs and the things that he asks me for, because in my mind, I give and give and give and give and give and give and give, and I go without for so long, and he just gets whatever he wants from me, and I don't feel like I'm getting the same thing in return, and a lot of resentment starts to build up without you even knowing it. And the behaviors that spawn from that place are what we're going to see from a type 6, because this is basically where they're at when they're at a level 5 stage of health. Okay, by the way, this can happen with any Enneagram number. It's not just a 6 thing. Resentment is equal opportunity emotion, you know what I mean? But that's just an example of what it could look like as a type 6. So when you're a 6 and you're here and you're in that place where you're starting to feel that resentment, but you probably haven't consciously acknowledged it yet, but you definitely do feel stress because you have put off your own ideas, your own desires for such a long time in order to give other people what they want, because you fear that if you don't do that, then they are going to abandon you or hurt you or retaliate against you, or at the very least, as a 6, your fear is that one day you will need help when you're in a bad situation, and they're not going to want to help you because you didn't give them what they wanted, right? That's something that 6s struggle with too. So the behavior that we see when you're in this place at a level 5 is, if you are operating more off of the phobic side, you're going to start to be really evasive, kind of aloof. You do not have the internal sense of self needed to say, no, I don't want to do this, or I'm feeling stressed. Well, you start to get a lot of empty promises from 6s at this point. This is where 6s start to say, yeah, sure, I'll definitely help you with that. Yes, I would love to do this for you. Yeah, I definitely think that's a good idea. You should do that. But then there's not any follow through. And it's frustrating for you if you're putting up with the 6 like this, because they're telling you one thing and they're making it seem like they're just so supportive of you and behind you, but they don't actually follow through on what they're telling you that they're going to do. And you get confused, because it's like, well, you say one thing and you do another. And what you're doing is you're dealing with the 6 that is just so incredibly scared to tell you no. They're placating you. They're giving you whatever it is that you want to hear with absolutely no intention of follow through. That's a very phobic expression of a level 5 state of health for 6. If we're talking about a counterphobic expression, this is where you kind of get the notes that I took about myself as I was observing myself for this video. I wrote snippy, not necessarily bossy at this point, but you kind of start to feel like you have to walk on eggshells around them. And I think for me, I know for me, but I think for other 6s as well, it's like we want so much. We're trying to figure out a way to exert ourselves, to put our own agenda out there, to find the courage to say, no, I don't support that. No, I don't agree with that. No, I'm not going to do that for you. And there's again, it's battling that internal fear of what's going to happen to us and what we're going to lose if we assert ourselves. It's terrifying. It is to me, because I'm 6. So it's a really hard place to be. And I have noticed that when I start to swing more towards my counterphobic side, I'm kind of testy. I'm definitely snippy. It's kind of like, don't poke the bear. If you leave me alone, I'm going to be fine. I have noticed that I will especially get this way if you start pressuring me for information or a decision about something that I haven't made up my mind about yet. And it can be a big thing or it could be a little thing. I'll give you an example. My husband I can kind of be brooding a little bit about something that's bothering me, that I really want to do this, but I'm scared to, and I'm not sure, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to muster myself up to do it. And then my husband can come in and say, hey, have you thought about what time you're going to take, our daughter over to the babysitter's tomorrow? Which is a reasonable question. He has every right to ask that question. But my response to him is, no, I haven't had time to think about that. Go away. I'll come and talk to you when I'm ready to talk to you. And he is like, Okay, like where did that come from? So, which isn't fair to him. So that's just an example of a counterphobic expression, okay, versus the phobic expression, which is just to completely be very, very, when I go into my more phobic side, I'll do things like I turn my phone off, I don't answer my text messages, I don't leave the house. If my husband is home and he can watch our child, then I go into our bedroom and I close the door and I don't come back. I don't want any more input or any more pressure put on me because I already can't handle the pressure that's on me right now, so that's a more phobic example again. Okay. Level 4, this is the top of the average range of health for Enneagram type 6. This is where we have a 6 that has started to get some ground. I think this is where, if you're a 6, you've really started to discover who you are, what you like, what you want. You're getting some sort of sense, concrete sense, of your internal locus of control, if you will, for lack of a better phrase. Your internal sense of self may be another way to say it. And you are starting to dabble in that. You're starting to exercise that a little bit. It's not going to be entirely healthy all of the time, because this is where there's still going to be some dogmatic thinking here, and there's still going to be a need to quell the anxiety that you feel. There's still going to be a need to have an external thing to lean on, but you're in this place where you're kind of starting to discover a little bit, this is what I want, and you're comparing that to what other people are asking of you, and you're learning to, to find what is your internal sense of guidance and what isn't, if that makes any sense. And I don't think that was a great way to say it, but 6s at this level are probably the most common type of 6s that when you read an Enneagram type 6 profile on the internet or in a book, this is probably the type of 6 that you're going to be reading about, which is a level 4 6. This is a 6 that, that they're really relaxed kind of people. They're very kind, very methodical, probably very, or they try to be, I would say, very morally upright, very, a strong adherence to their, ethical core, if you will, whatever their values are. This is the 6 that says, that may feel like perhaps their religion is what makes them feel safe. And so they just dedicate themselves to their religion. And I'm not saying they quit their job or, and go try to be a priest or whatever it is. It's nothing like that, but they just begin to internally rely heavily on that external thing. There's not a whole lot of anxiety because they've got this concrete sense of, okay, this is my thing, this is what I'll use, and I'll compare that to my internal truth, while they're doing their internal sorting kind of a thing. But there's not a recognition, there's not, and there may not actually even be a sense of pressure at this point, because this is where 6s have found that what they think is their sweet spot. In other words, the thing that they think they can rely on that's not going to shift or move. And so there's no pressure at that point. They found the thing that they can believe in, the thing that they can support, and the thing that they believe is going to support them in return. And so they give themselves to that, and they're happy as long as that doesn't change. When we are talking about a phobic expression of this is when a 6 is probably their most compliant. This is when we have a 6 that is okay allowing that outside source, whatever it is, to think for them. And they're just very obedient. Yes, sir, no, sir, whatever you want, sure, that kind of a thing. This is the place where if you were really going to take advantage of someone that's a 6 on the Enneagram, this is kind of like the sweet spot where you could get away with it, and they'll just give it to you, provided, again, that they feel like they can trust you and you're going to be a constant source of guidance for them, whatever that looks like for each particular 6. I will give you an example. I used to have a supervisor at a job that was a level 4 6 with a 5 wing, very phobic person. And this guy, he made me sick because he was so compliant. It was like it killed me because you could tell that he had some sort of sense of self. When he and I got away and it wasn't just the job and we could talk, he was very opinionated. He had lots of very strong faiths and beliefs and things that guided his life, but he found his security in the place where we worked, in his job. And it was so sad because the place where we worked asked him to be, most of the time, something other than who he was. And I would sit out in the parking lot with him and have a conversation with one person, and then go inside the building and watch him completely morph into what it was that he thought this business, this company, this industry wanted him to be. And he would state one belief, at lunch at a restaurant, and then we'd go back into the office and he would state completely opposite beliefs, like, well, I could see how, that's true, and blah, blah, blah. Like, we had one instance where the president of the company had come by and had done some sort of little, half-assed inspirational meeting, to try to, keep everybody from quitting their job because it was a shitty ass job. And he was in the room, and the president was standing up there saying all this bullshit stuff. And I'm an INFJ, so I'm basically just calling bullshit on all of it, right? Because it is. So I'm reading between the lines and I'm like, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. That was bullshit. This whole thing is bullshit. Can I go back to my job? He's sitting down on the other end of the row, and I look down at him, and he's sitting there and he's like, yeah, that's right, man. Yeah. And again, the same guy who, if we go to lunch and we're not actually there at the workplace, has got a completely different set of opinions. And anyways, it's just sad, because there's a degree of selling out that occurs here at a level 4, state of health for Enneagram type 6. And it just kills me because there's still this internal sense of self, this sense of knowing, again, what your agenda is, what you believe, what you want, what your internal sense of truth is, may be even another way to say it. But 6 is just, at a level 4, this is where you start to have that sellout happen. So again, the compliance is the phobic expression of that. The counterphobic expression, and this is interesting, is hypervigilance. This is where you get 6s that start to do their thing where they're overanalyzing everything and they're over preparing, and you're almost kind of like, hey, it's okay, calm down, you're making too big a deal out of this. I'm guilty. I'm guilty of both of them, more so the hypervigilance thing for me than the compliance. It's easier for me to say fuck the man than it is for me to, suck the man's dick, excuse me for the crude expression. But I'm more on the hypervigilant side in that. Okay, so this is what I was doing. I'm going to go back to that meeting, okay, where I'm sitting there in that chair calling bullshit in my head to all this stuff that the president of this company is saying, and my supervisor's down the way acting like, all he needs is a pair of pom-poms so he can do a little cheer for the business, right? He was doing the phobic version of a level 4 state of health for type 6. I was doing the counterphobic. I was listening to this and I'm like, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. I wonder what else they're lying about. I'm going to make notes of all the stuff this guy is saying right now, and then I'm just going to watch, and I'm going to wait and see how much of it actually happens, and I'm going to keep a record of all the lies that this guy is told. And then I'm going to know that we can't trust him, because I got a feeling in my gut we can't trust him. If we can't trust him, I bet we can't trust the people he hires, because liars like to hire other liars, and then they collaborate together and they have little conspiracies to how they can fuck over all their employees and all this other stuff. And so it's stuff like that. It's thinking like that. So he's on one end like, yes, that's good. Well said, sir. Well said. And I'm down at the other end and I'm like, bullshit. You're a liar. That's not true. I can see straight through you. I'm not falling for any of this. All the sheeple in here are eating out of the palm of your hand, but I'm not doing it. So, that's just the counterphobic example, if you will, of a level 4 stage of health for Enneagram type 6. So those are the average levels. I am going to stop because I do not have time to do the healthy levels. Please come back and watch that one, because I will use myself as an example there too, because I do have good moments, believe it or not. And I'm actually a really awesome person. And pretty much everybody that meets me likes me, with very few exceptions. Anyways, so yeah, if you could just come back and do me a solid one, I would like to know that you're thinking well of me, because I'm a 6 and I need to know that. Anyways, thanks.